I will.
To the collective, where every conversation ignites a new perspective. Join us as we delve into the journeys of remarkable individuals, explore the art of growth, resilience, and the power of a shared mission as we strive to be better together. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today. I am stoked. We got the return of Steve here. We got the return of Greg here, and I am pumped for this particular episode. And now, while I am pumped, you should be too. Do the things, like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all the good stuff, get your emails whenever we go live, which, of course, Fridays for The Collective, Wednesdays for the workshop, and if you have not yet, make sure you're signed up for the Reinforcement Loop. That is our weekly newsletter. It just went out a couple days ago, and it is excellent, if I do say so myself. So get yourself signed up, get yourself some brain candy, and you're good to go. If you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, put them up in the comment section. We can hit them throughout the show, of course. And as always, I just really am digging the concept of simplicity in our lives. So let's get some intros out of the way, and then we get right into the conversation. Greg, it's been a while, so hit us up. 10 to 15 seconds. Where you come from? All that good stuff.
Greg Everett in Central Oregon. I coach competitive Olympic-style weightlifters for a living and provide educational content for coaches and athletes in that sport.
Bam. Love it. And Steve, how about yourself?
Steve, coming from North Central Texas, and I mental skills coach mainly now. I retired law enforcement for 24 years in the military, and I still contract overseas.
Bam. I love it. Sean, how's the mountains and being at home treating you?
Yes, good. Good to be alive, boys. Good to be alive. So the topic today, simplicity. I'm not sure where it'll go, but I do know this. It's going to go in the right directions, because my consideration in regards to simplicity this morning is almost entirely based on you can't make something simple unless you've been in the game long enough to make the mistakes. And so, like, you've got to take simplicity and make it overly complicated over a few years in order to Occam's razor it, and then find out what simplicity is for you. So the two fellas on the panel right now, they have been in the game for so long, and they've done so many things, and they've no doubt done it wrong enough times to realize how to simplify not just their personal lives, but how they simplify it for others. So I don't care who you are out there right now. If you think you understand simplicity as a 20-year-old and you've only had one job in your life, you probably don't understand simplicity. So I'm glad we've got some kind of older dogs in this convo to really kind of take this conversation in the direction it needs to go.
Bam. Right off the bat, Sean calling everybody else old. I like it. That's how you begin a conversation. Quick comment. First off, Dan C. jumps in here. He says, good morning, gentlemen. Freedom in the heart, steel in the spine, and an ass kicker on point. We shall now proceed. That's a good setup right there. And I want to start this with Steve. This was your kind of concept of ops, and I want to get your first thoughts when I asked you about it, and you were like, simplicity is the key. Hit us up. What do you got?
Well, we all know the old term is KISS, keep it simple, stupid, right? And I've always said that no matter how smart or how dumb you are, everybody understands simplicity, but not everybody understands complexity. And so through a young age of 18, 19, 20, 21, up to 25 in the Army, you watch a little bit of leadership and over planning, task saturation, and things get more complex. But really what it comes down to is simplicity. So I've taken those things, watching my dad raise me, how he did things, and then I brought it into my own life and my own leadership after the military, into SWAT, and still what I do overseas now, but mainly for my daughters and my family. So raising my daughters, they're competitive CrossFit athletes, but all around everything. On the ranch, they do everything. We just make everything super simple, because with some of my clients that I coach now, I get a lot of clients from a wide array of backgrounds, and they come in with their lives are in shambles, and we start peeling everything away, and we bring everything back down to simple tasks and simplicity. And it's a good way for you to kind of figure out and move forward from there.
That's a good place to start. Greg, what are your first thoughts when you saw the email?
Well, my first thoughts are I have very little to contribute. And then, as always on this show, thinking about infinity things, and then you guys can't get me to stop talking. So, but I thinking about it since you invited me is along the lines of what Steve was saying, what Sean was saying, it does seem like this ultimate goal is to reduce, eliminate, simplify in so many realms, whether it's lifestyle, whether it's teaching, coaching, otherwise instructing, learning. And at the same time, I think it's really critical that we acknowledge there are circumstances and reasons that preclude simplification or make it not necessarily the best idea. So, the classic expression, which I think is Albert Einstein, or at least allegedly, is that, if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, then you don't understand it. And I love that on so many levels, because it really does force you to understand the absolute fundamental principles involved in whatever it is you're talking about, and then figure out a way to communicate those things clearly enough that, like Steve said, anybody, dumb, smart, anywhere in between, can understand it in a way that is valuable and useful to them. But on the other hand, you have to recognize that in a situation like that, like, let's say I want to describe quantum physics to a 6-year-old. Well, I'm not really going to teach him what quantum physics is and how to do equations and things. I'm going to teach him this really core concept, so he kind of understands the purpose of it, or the very most general idea. And that's a good start for a 6-year-old. But if he wants to become a quantum physicist, we can't keep simplifying it forever. It has to get continually more and more complex over time until he reaches both the ability to create, maintain, understand that most simple version of it, and the most complex. And it's kind of this situation where you have to be able to balance those two things and know when is appropriate to apply, to use, to communicate, and when it's appropriate to simplify in order to provide what somebody else needs or what you need in that situation.
Might take it. Sean, what do you got?
So this morning, as I was thinking a little bit more about the topic, I was also trying to put up a post this morning. And Chance, if you can grab the photo that I put up in my IG, and I'd actually like to use it to make a point. Something that I wish I would have understood when I was younger, or in my 20s, perhaps. I wish someone would have sat me down and explained this to me. And so if you're a young buck out there right now, pay attention, please. Life has a lot of commonality in it, and you're supposed to look for as much commonality as you can so that you can almost use that commonality in nearly anything that you do. So I'm going to use Greg as the example in this case. So if Chance grabs that photo, it's a photo of me in a stack. I'm the guy on the far left flank. That is what's called a dirt dive. We were down in Paris Valley back in 1989 with the Skyhawks training camp. The Skyhawks is the national parachute demonstration team for the Canadian Armed Forces. And it's kind of a big deal to be on the team. I'm on the far left, and I'm the last guy out of the stack. And so all the people in front of me are going to punch through the plane's door or through the exit, and I have to keep up with them. So if you look at my stance and compare it to everyone else's, I'm procedural ready. I've adopted my standard issue base posture structure. It's a bit deeper than I would normally fight out of. It's a bit deeper than I would normally shoot out of. It's a bit deeper than I would do a lot of things out of. But it's heading in the right direction towards where Greg lives. And so my base posture structure could almost have I could be dropping down into one of the standard issue positions that I see on Greg's feed a fair bit. Stuff that I'm actually not that good at. But I suppose if I wanted to get good at it, I would just simply use the commonalities that I've picked up throughout my life and drive it into Greg's sport. I wouldn't be great at it, but I would already have a lot of understanding of the common base posture structure or aspects of approaching something procedurally in my life already. I can almost apply it to anything now. So my point is this. When you look at the commonality of a lot of things that you'll need to do in your life, you need to start getting good at those simple, common aspects that you can then apply nearly in anything and get good at it pretty quickly. by just simply using your fighting stance, your shooting stance, your gym stance, your talking stance. You shouldn't show up, I think, as 104 different people in every single thing that you do. You can be your common self as an excellent producer of work or excellent producer of thought, but you have to kind of hang on to the central idea of the common aspects that you'll gather throughout your life can be applied in everything in life. That's what I would have loved to have heard when I was a young buck.
This it makes me think of really what we're doing is seeking commonality, right? You're going from one training aspect to another training aspect to another training aspect, and we're just seeking out the common denominators between all of those systems so that you can transition from one to the other to the next. One of the things that made me think of when when Steve brought up the topic was the fact of gross motor skills when we were learning how to use rifles and stuff like that in basic training and and beyond, is that at the time what they were teaching was you're going to lose your fine motor skills under stress, right? These are complicated things to do while under stress, so let's focus on the major muscle groups. Let's do things in gross motor movement. You're going to use your arms rather than your fingertips. And that is the same kind of deal. You're still making the movements, you're still doing the maneuvers, but you're breaking it down into a very simple system. I think this is great so far. I'm going to go around the table again. Steve, you got any other thoughts?
Simplicity, baseline fundamentals is a good place to start for anyone when you're teaching something new, right? But also as you get better at it, you grow in it, you are able to understand complexities and work through complexities because you started at a baseline level of the fundamentals. It's also a good thing to cycle back to. So I'll give you an example. We go out and we shoot hundreds and hundreds of rounds each year, right? Thousands of rounds. There's a couple days in there within that calendar year that we always go back down to the basic fundamentals of shooting and or CQB and stuff like that. And so you could take your sport, you can take your task, anything it is, there's some level of value to go back to the fundamentals to bring someone back. Because as we add complexity to it, sometimes we get lost in that and we start skipping and losing the fundamental piece when we started. And so I like it because you can start it and you can always go back to it. And a lot of times I will take someone back to baseline fundamentals and then build the complexity back on it. Kind of like what Greg was saying, because you want someone to be able to operate in complexity. So that's the goal here, is to build them to operate in that, but you don't flood them out of the gates with just the beginning stage of complexity because they can't understand it. Baseline fundamentals are understood, and then you start your building steps, and then you add complexity layer by layer by layer by layer until they can navigate through it. And so I like it because I can always circle back to it, and it's a must that I do it quite a bit with clients. I do it with my own daughters. I do it with myself, right? And even within our family. So I like it for that.
I like that a lot. I teach a class called Fundamental Movements in Jiu-Jitsu, and I basically broke down what I know about Jiu-Jitsu into about 6 moves total. And by not only teaching that class, it has made me able to access those movements in all kinds of new variations. But I get to every day go back to why does this work? Oh, it works because of this. Oh, right. Okay. So I need to focus on that fundamental piece when I'm doing the more complex stuff. I love that. Greg, you got any other thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, to piggyback off what both Steve and Sean said, I think this again applies to both learning and teaching, of course. And to Steve's point, you have to start with the fundamentals, and then you build the complexities on that. And the fundamentals always need to remain this kind of touchstone, right? So the complex stuff gets overwhelming, especially when you are in a situation when you are forced for whatever reason to kind of accelerate that learning. Like, so I think a lot of, military related situations, they've become very good at compressing learning into remarkably brief periods of time while keeping it effective. And I think, like with what I do, the key is building the base on those fundamentals, so the person who is learning and the person who is teaching never loses sight of that as kind of the guiding principles, right? So if you approach it the other way, and you get, this is particularly true for adults who come into something like weightlifting, or shooting. I had this experience coming into shooting, as a relatively, as an adult who was probably too much of a thinker. You almost want to start backward. You say, well, I look at all this fancy, complex stuff. That looks really interesting. Tell me about that. And so the mistake that I think instructors are can easily make because of that when working with adults in that situation is they say, okay, yeah, let's talk about this. And they overwhelm people with this information because it's interesting to them too. They like talking about it. They're good at it. They understand it. And it's very difficult to then go back to the beginning and get those fundamentals in order once someone has all that stuff floating around in their head, because they're trying to reconcile all these details with this pared down, set of basic rules. And because they don't understand those details well, they don't quite fit together. And so it's this constant battle. Like Steve was saying, you keep returning to the fundamentals in shooting. How's your grip? What's your sight acquisition, process? These really straightforward things that you then, if you introduce these crazy, drills with all kinds of movement, multiple targets, having to keep sequences in mind, you forget about those most basic things if they have not been solidified over time with this constant exposure and return to the fundamentals. And so I think that is really critical, for me as a coach. It's easy to get carried away, even with, like, say, training program design. Sean, I know you have this issue with, with your mountain bike people too, I'm sure, where suddenly you'll stop and realize, like, hang on, I need to kind of revisit this most fundamental purpose. What are we trying to achieve here? Who is this person that's trying to achieve it? And have I kind of gone off this intended path? And kind of get back to that main road instead of being on these little tributaries and going into all these rabbit holes that are so fun and exciting, but also just make the overall trip way longer than it needs to be and not as effective. Speaking of rabbit holes and tributaries, and
I love it,
here
man.
I go again.
This is why we keep bringing you back on the show, not just because we love your beard, right? That's that's a secondary purpose. But I think this is beautiful because I see this in on the mats all the time. I get my students that'll come and be like, "Hey, man, I saw this move on Instagram. Look at this," and you're just like, "That is the most complicated, unneeded thing right now. Like, let's just work on your base. How about that? Let's start there."
Yeah.
Sean, you got any thoughts?
Well, let's teach you how to tie your belt first, and then we can get to that.
Exactly.
Indeed. But and we all know this. It's not enough to kind of look at what was just said as a binary moment, like an on-off switch. Like, hey, bro, slow your roll. You don't know how to spell white belt yet. But I love someone who shows up who's like way overthinking. I love someone who shows up with too much complexity. I love someone who shows up that there's so much in the game that they think they are the game. I love that, man, because at least you got something to work with. If someone shows up and they're like kind of not into it, then I'm not into it. So I'd rather have someone who shows up who's got their jazz hands going, because I can temper that. What I don't care to do is if someone shows up like a dead fish and I've got to like prop them up, I've got other things to do. And so that's just something to chew on. I'll say this, if we're going to talk about shooting, which I think is a really good proxy for this particular overarching topic. Everyone, for the first time ever, got to see me shoot on the internet, because I've never ever put any shooting up before. So this year's the first time anyone has ever seen like me in a video shooting, and it was craptastic. My shooting sucks compared to when I was the man like 30 years ago. I was so much faster and so much more deadly precise. But I ain't anymore, because I'm freaking 62. And the last time I put rounds downrange was like beyond the horizon. And so what is interesting to me, though, since we're talking about baselines, is when I put that pistol in my hand for the first time, I thought, how am I going to establish what I am and who I am and what my skills are right now with this weapon? How am I going to do that? And my thought was this, and I stuck to this thought from the first round right through to the last round on the second day. I was just going to do instinctive shooting, which meant that I was actually applying Occam's razor to the entire process. I didn't look at my sights at all. I was trying to remember my base posture structure. More correctly, I was trying to re-engage deeply embedded programming that when my shoulders here, my shoulders there, my wrists feel like this, and I feel a little locked out like I am right now, where I look is where the holes show up. So that's what I was trying to pull on, was like really, really old, deeply embedded programming, so that I wasn't adding the complexity of trying to gain sights or trying to control my perfect trigger pull or trying to ... All of that nuance was like downstream. From an upstream position, I needed to establish a place where I was stripping out all of the white noise of performance and just going back to my base posture structure, deep programming, and see what showed up. So those results that showed up kind of sucked, because I was like kind of pushing my own abilities, which aren't great right now, but I wanted to see the failure points. I wanted to see where I'm not hitting within the small head target. I wanted to see where I was kind of like shitting the bed. In order to know that, you've got to stick to some basics that you understand to see where the basics break. If you're starting off on something that you haven't touched for a while, or you're into something new and you're trying to overreach on your subject, all of that is just white noise. You don't really get a clear read on your baseline. So again, that's why I stuck to instinctive shooting. That's why it looked like I can't shoot. But I didn't really care about what people thought about my shooting. What I cared about was learning what I'm capable of on that range day so that I could do better on the second range day. So, what are you training for on a range? Are you training to look good? Are you training to be pose ready? Or are you training to be procedural ready? There's a good question.
That is a good question. And I'm going to pass this around. I just want to hit these comments real quick before we do. Ethan Scenaris jumped in and said, "Howdy, y'all. Good to see you, buddy." Says, "I'm starting to get into the medical first responder world with St. John Ambulance, and it is definitely mastery of basic first responder principles like scene survey, primary survey, etc. It's hard to focus in an emergency without fundamentals that are innately built in and almost instinctive." And I think that's what we seek, right? Especially military training, first responder training. You want to be able to do those fundamentals without even thinking about it. They should just happen. And then Dancy jumped in here and says point shooting. Yeah, absolutely. You guys got any thoughts on what Sean just dropped there? I'm going to hit Greg first. What do you got?
Yeah. First of all, I've been dying to ask since you got on, Sean, is that a Point Break t-shirt? Second of all, yes, okay, perfect. What Sean was saying reminds me a lot of a situation I encounter a lot coaching, right? Is when you have an athlete who is in a situation where they have lost confidence, they begin overthinking, they try to intellectually control this whole process through a movement that is both complex but extremely brief. You can't do it. You can't think your way through an explosive technical motion that happens in 1 second or less. And so one of the ways I'll try to get someone out of that situation and back into a position where they can perform well is say, hey, remember 2 sets ago when you did this, perfect snatch. I want you to stop thinking about what you're supposed to be doing, what you're not supposed to be doing. And I want you to focus on the feeling of that lift, right? Not specifically like, what did I feel about it? But just try to replicate the sensation of that motion. And that's the ultimate simplification, I think, when it comes to motor skills, or anything like that. Like Sean's talking about shooting, you're back to previous embedded training that you just haven't touched on recently. You're going back to your most fundamental underlying kind of athletic abilities that you've hopefully spent your whole life developing in certain ways or another. And you are allowing those kind of more primal centers in your brain and your body to take over those things And that's what it's good at. Like, your brain is very good at figuring out ways to complete a motor task if you get out of its way, right? So I'll tell people, hey, you're driving with one foot on the brake and one foot on the gas. Like, no brake, just go. And 9 times out of 10, you get a really good result. And that 10th time, you have to rethink your approach a little bit, but you get there eventually.
You do get there eventually, as long as you got the grit to keep going, right? Like, that's sometimes people will hit that one time and they'll be like, no, I'm done, and they're out, which is
Yeah.
tough, but that's for them to figure out. Steve, you got any thoughts?
That's one of the things that's difficult, right? Is dealing with someone that overthinks something and you're trying to get them back down to a basic fundamental. I've often used that same methodology as like, I want you to feel shooting, lifting. I want you to feel this and to tell me, because when you take the correct rep that they did it, they were allowed to let the mind get out of the way and let the body perform the task. So I use the mind and the body in connection. The mind is theory. It tells me the complexity of what I need to do to get through it. And then I let the body perform the task. Oftentimes we inject the mind too much during the lift or the shooting. And what happens is we overcomplicate it and we lose the ability to perform the task actionably, right? So I'll also do, if you can see that they're overthinking like a shooting stage or something and you're losing them, I'll bring it back down. Now, this has affected me as an older coach. Now, a younger coach, I kind of wanted people to understand complexity, to look how smart I was. And I realized that doesn't work. And so now I'll take them back. I'll have them holster or put the bar down or whatever we're doing. And I'll ask them something personal in their life. And it'll take their mind off track of the task that we're doing. And I'll ask them, what's your dog's name? Oh, that's a cool dog. I got the same breed. And then I'll just say, okay, 2 shots to the body, 1 shot to the head. And what happens is they start shooting with a more clearer mind and the ability to just perform the task physically, actionably, and then they do it. And what I just did is I just unplugged the mind from oversaturating or overcomplexing the task. You know what I mean? So it's amazing to me how many people get in their own way. And so, but it affects everybody and everyone's got to learn how to control it. I could go to Greg right now and I have never cleaned, and this is very predominant in men than women from my experience. But I see all the stuff on the internet. I can see a snatch. Well, I think I know what to do. So he's going to tell me some baseline fundamental, and I'm going to drift away from it because I'm going to override his ability or him telling me what to do because I think I know better. You know what I mean? And so how do you break that down and get people away from that to realize? And for me, what I do is I talk to someone before they start doing it. Shooters that are lifters are so much easier to train. If I have someone that knows how to lift, I break it down because your stance, your grip, it's so many things that are connectable with each other. But I oftentimes just talk to people and I get them to calm down and realize we're going to do one thing at a time. And then it cuts all that white noise out, like Sean was saying and stuff. And then we just break down to a stance, and then we'll work on grip, and then we start marrying those up together, and then we start layering it on. Right. So
I really like that. One of my big ones I use for my students is the the wet bag of sand movement. But I mean, like in jiu-jitsu, you're usually on top of somebody, and that's my testing process. If they start to overthink things, I'm like, okay, just be a wet bag of sand, and then they have to like let go of everything, and then you'll see if they're in position or not, because all their weight will shift or they won't. And I love it, getting right back to the most simple things you can do. Sean, what do you got?
Well, I've got a question for the fellas, for all of you. And I've got my own thoughts on it, but I don't need to give my thoughts. I'm more curious about your thoughts. So I'm, again, going to use myself as the case study, as it were, my craptastic shooting. I showed up on the firing line with some deeply embedded programming that was actually fairly world class. And until I fired that first round, I didn't know how I was going to shoot. Like, honestly, I didn't even know if I was going to hit paper. But the first round went where I hoped it would go, and then the second one did, and the third one did, and so on and so forth. So, until I fired the first one, I had doubts about myself, but I had some sort of expectations as well. And unfortunately, my expectations of my performance were like kind of world class, but I'd never been in the game for frickin' decades. So the tricky thing for me was I showed up as kind of like pretty good in my head and my background, but as an unknown before I put that first one down range. And I gotta say, I was freaking nervous, boys. I was nervous for not what other people would think. I was nervous because like it's kind of part of my identity. And Greg, your part of your identity is like you know how to throw things around in the weight room. But if you didn't do that for 3-4 decades, like your identity showing up to that bar for the first time is like in doubt. And so whether it's been for you guys personally, or whether it is for athletes or clients that you have engaged with over the years, what have you seen when someone shows up in front of you that we'll call it has a deep body of work, but it is an unknown quantity because they've been away from it for so long? How do you approach this kind of a situation?
That's a dang good question. I'm going to pass to the boys. Steve, let me hit you first.
For me, I think it's a little bit easier because they've been in a position where they know how to get back to there, or where they were there before. So they have some semblance of, oh, okay. So they understand how to get back probably faster than someone that's just never done it. And so you're building them from ground zero. So I could take someone like you and ask, what's your goal? What do you want to do? And then work from there. Okay. Do you remember stance? Show me your stance. Show me your grip, sight alignment, target focus or sights, right? Close in, target, further back, sights. So, right. And then we can do some test firing as far as close in, get a little bit further back to kind of get you warmed up. And what that does is that familiarity starts to bring back that feeling that you were put in those positions decades ago. And now the brain is like, oh, I remember. And you'll forget things along the way. And those are just small little like obstacles that we just overcome and we bring back. But for me, I think and everyone's a little bit different, but for me, I think it's a little bit easier for someone that's touched whatever you're doing now before, and they did it fairly well, because at your level, at your standard was pretty high in the Canadian military. So you were doing stuff at a high level, and at that level, you remember it still, but sometimes the body forgets how to perform it. And so we just connect those two pieces.
I like it. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, exactly what Steve said. You've got more material to work with in that situation. It's just a matter of figuring out where to start and kind of the best way to help them bring it out without, I think, putting pressure on them. Like, hey, you already know this, so what's your problem? Why don't you remember how to grip the gun? And rather, which I think can be easy for certain types of instructors to do because they are impatient and get frustrated. But I think it feeds perfectly into something I talk about a lot is having intentions rather than expectations. So those of us who have had a background, whether it's shooting or lifting, we tend to have expectations on performance. I expect myself to be able to be a world-class shooter, even though I haven't loaded a gun in 30 years. I expect myself to be able to go execute great Olympic lifts, even though I retired 10 years ago. I got 6 anchors in my shoulder and 2 bulging cervical discs, and I feel like I'm 100. But rather than going about it that way, having intentions allows you to kind of set goals, to have these things to work towards. So you've got, a clear path that what you're trying to accomplish. You have steps along the way to get there, and you have something where your ambition can kind of push you towards this difficult thing. And if you don't quite get there, immediately or ever, it's not this devastating existential crisis where, like Sean said earlier, this is your identity now falling apart and the world no longer makes sense and I'm a horrible person. Like, what's the point? When you have these intentions, you can say, well, I've made it from A to X. I didn't quite get all the way to Z, whatever it is. and look at all this stuff I've accomplished. Look at how well I did. Maybe I'm not quite where I used to be, whatever the case is, but I can still work towards it. Or I recognize now that my goals need to be somewhat different than they were 10, 15, 25, 30 years ago. And it becomes this much more enjoyable, but also effective process in that situation where you're not, it's not like you're hurting yourself every time you don't achieve what you expect to achieve. Rather, you're able to kind of take some pride in whatever you are accomplishing and use that as continuing motivation and to keep you enthusiastic and engaged, rather than you getting shut down. Nah, I don't want to do this anymore. This is lame. Everyone thinks I look stupid. I don't know how to hold a gun anymore. I skipped 3 of them off the berm, and the paper's pristine. Everyone's looking at me. So I think that's just a key, and it's not easy to do. I think especially when you are a very driven, ambitious person. We want to be the best. We want to be the best right now and forever. But learning to take a step back and recognize, like, hey, what are my priorities here? What am I actually trying to achieve? And how can I do this in a better way without setting myself up for failure?
This reminds me of Sean made a comment earlier about tempering, and that it's been sticking in my brain for the last little while. And the process of tempering is, the removal of impurities is really what you're doing as you're tempering your blade. You're trying to make sure that it is as pure as possible, as simple as possible of a structure, so it has strength. But again, it's kind of hilarious because I watched your video, Sean, and you went from, like, I'm saying you probably remember yourself having a grouping like this, and now your grouping's like this. So, like, give yourself a little slack. It's okay.
Terrible, Sean.
A little bit of
Come
grace.
on.
It's like it's not that you're completely missing the target. I saw where your rounds were going, and they were pretty close. But I just want to touch on this too, is that I think, like you're saying, Greg, is that we get caught with ego quite a bit. I had a student a little while ago. He was a high school, college wrestler. He was great. But he had stopped wrestling after school. It had been 20 plus years. He'd put on some weight. He was not his former self. And he really struggled to do jiu-jitsu, to try to grasp the concepts, because they were not quite, not in line with his wrestling. And he fell to that exact same thing where he expected himself to be able to just rock basically everybody in our club. And he was getting beat by smaller, less trained, less skilled people. And I struggled. I didn't know how to connect the dots for him because I wasn't a wrestler. I have some very basic knowledge of wrestling, but I didn't know at the time how to put those things together for him. And unfortunately, we haven't seen him at the gym in a while, but I didn't know where to go with that. Do you guys have any thoughts on where I could have helped him grasp the concepts without the knowledge of the process? Who wants to take this first? Let's go, Steve. Go ahead.
Well, I will say this. Greg nailed it right on the head, dude. What's your intent? That is the first thing out of the box. Like what you ask somebody, what's their intent, right? So you can cut out what you don't need to instruct with them or do with them. And everybody that leaves the game 10, 20 years ago, what do you think they want to do? They want to go right back to where they left off. Right. But as the older you get, there's a sense of knowing and understanding. I'm 54. I've got 21 surgeries. Things are not going to be the same. And so that experience and that age sometimes helps you and realize, okay, like Greg said, I'm going to start here's my intent, and I'm going to get these wins, and I got to show that I'm proud of what I've done within here. But there's that always thing in the back of their brain that says, I should be able to. And I've often reminded people, I'm like, hey, you're not 18 anymore, dude. Right. And so we were doing CrossFit workouts one time, and I got a little upset that there was a 25-year-old kid, and I was in my 40s, right? Because we worked out for SWAT all the time. And he was beating us. He beat us on the leaderboard. And I had an older guy come up and he goes, he should beat you. He's 25. If he's not beating you, something's wrong with him. And I'm like, that simplicity of it made it more sensible to me. Right. But that thing is like, what's your intent? And then you can start a baseline for someone and start helping them out. But what I like to do is I like to communicate to people when not in the middle of the task or performing the task, but what happens is by talking to someone on off related topics, like I said earlier, is it helps calm that mind down and it starts brushing away the ego. And then I will use my own failures onto someone else and I'll tell them, hey, this is exactly what I did and this is what happened to me. And I'll kind of make light of it. And so what happens, they don't feel like I need to be the best I got to be right in front of this guy. Or if someone's filming, that's when things start to go. That's when the wheels fall off right there, because everyone wants to look good for the camera, right? But if I start releasing that ego about how they got to perform in front of me, and I tell them a little story about myself, you achieve so much more, because then you start to build trust, and then you start to build that you just strip away more of the mental piece of what I should be able to do, what I should be doing, and what I was doing when I was 18. But Greg's saying, perfect. Absolutely. What's your intent? We'll work from there.
Man, love that. Greg, I'm gonna come back to you. What do you got? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to build on what Steve said again, because and I wanted to talk about this. He mentioned this earlier about, I'm going to ask someone personal. We're going to kind of get completely off topic, get someone's mind off this thing. And that's the greatest thing you can do in that situation. And my go-to in those is typically humor. I will make jokes. Like, we will be in the warm-up room of the lifter's biggest competition of their life, and you can see the smoke coming out of their ears, and you see like that panic kind of setting in. Quick joke, and suddenly you get them to laugh, and it's like everything is flushed out, and they kind of reset to that baseline of like, oh yeah, here we go. This is not the end of the world. I'm not saving Europe from the invasion of a fascist dictator or curing cancer. We're just lifting weights. Now, I mean, in your guys' cases, sometimes the situations are a bit more serious and with more serious consequences. But the point being, even in a situation like that, I think being able to pull yourself back, out of that tunnel vision, being able to see the big picture, remember your situation as a whole, remember that it's very easy to take yourself way too seriously. As Steve said, you get the ego, the camera's on, people are watching. All of a sudden, your intent goes from learning or improving this thing you're doing or executing a certain task to impressing people for your own, assuaging your own ego. But also going back to what Sean said right at the outset is finding commonalities, right? And Steve actually touched on this too, where it's easier to teach someone to shoot if they have lifting experience. And I think that comes down to being able to use analogies and things like that to help people understand these basic equivalencies, right? So we have posture in a lift that's going to dictate how everything else goes. We have the same kind of thing in shooting, right? Your position establishes basically everything else, whether that's your actual whole body position, how you're gripping the bar, the gun, how you're presenting it. So the more experiences you have, I think, as an individual, the more you are able to recognize all of these common threads. And therefore, as an instructor, as a coach, as a teacher, you're able to kind of weave those things together to communicate these ideas better to people, so that even if you are kind of stretching a little bit and it's not something you're an expert in necessarily, enough, those simplified versions enough that you can make some sort of relationship that resonates with that person, and they can connect it to something they're familiar with. And suddenly this new thing is less intimidating, it's less complex, and they can get refocused on, okay, here's where we're starting. This makes more sense to me now. And now we can build on this.
I like that, Sean. Coming to you next. What do you got?
Couple of things, and I'll make the first one reasonably short because I think it's self-explanatory to some degree. One of the advantages that we all have right now, particularly Steve and Greg, is that they've been in the coaching game a long time, which means that they have to have become, over a period of time, very good observers of the human condition, of the human mind, of movement, of all things human related. And then they also have to be good at forming patterns. So you have to be able to see things and you have to be able to patternize things if you're ever to become a good coach. So for these two guys, they can explain a lot of different sports, a lot of different life through their coaching lens, through their observation and patternization of how that person in front of them can do things better. But not everyone is a good coach. Not a lot of people have ever learned to coach. And so they don't see the world the way that Greg and Steve do. They don't patternize the world the way that they do. And so there's nothing stopping them, though. And so what's to stop you from starting to observe yourself like a coach all of a sudden, where you're trying to see the things that we're talking about right now and trying to form your own patterns of yourself? The only thing that's stopping you is you've just never started doing it, I feel. And it's probably because no one's ever empowered you or ever said, hey, anyone can do this. What these guys are saying as long-time coaches is something that you can start doing for yourself. You don't need a coach to start self-coaching. But if you want to get good at self-coaching, go find yourself a good coach to teach you how to self-coach. Just a thought. Now, I want to move on to the second, more important thought on simplicity. I've found, anyway, in my own life that anything that I want to get good at, I have to kind of get into it pretty hard right at the start. Like I don't kind of edge my way into anything. If something catches my eye, I kind of dive almost into the deep end to see how far the rabbit hole goes. So that requires passion. And of course, it requires folks. It requires a whole pile of things. But I have a certain passion for life, a certain curiosity. And so if we're talking about simplicity as the overarching theme, passion and curiosity can overwhelm simplicity. And that's just because the velocity of passion and the velocity of curiosity can draw in so many things at once that it is kind of overwhelming if I'm a noob, if I'm just beginning in something. And so I find that some of the people who have the greatest successes over the long term have the greatest struggles at the front end when they're first starting out. If they show up with too much passion and too much curiosity in life, these are two levers that you've kind of got to learn how to move and manipulate and pay attention to, I feel. They're not just binary switches. You guys got any thoughts on that?
Bam. Steve, I'm going to hit you first.
I think there's actually a lot of good in that right there, as far as like the people that we look at now, like, oh my gosh, look where they are at. Look in the very beginning stages of where they were at. And sometimes it was a struggle for them. And that's not everyone. There are phenoms out there that just walk into whatever, and then they're just really good. But it's so far few in between. But those ones do out there exist. You know, Sean, you said something about as far as, I lost my train of thought, but that eagerness of someone coming to learn something. We used to use a term is like, I would rather pull the reins back on somebody than try to get them to go. It's so much harder. And so you can control that chaos a little bit by pulling them back and, strategizing where they need to be, versus it is so hard to go against free will to say, let's go, come on, let's go. And they don't want to. You know what I mean? And so you often ask, like, your intent, what's your intent? Do you even want to be here? And we'll like selection, we all seen guys that go on podcasts now and we watch them where they're at. And, but some guys will tell you like, oh man, I failed selection 3 times. But we think, oh no, they just walk out there and they're just amazing. No, everyone has their own little struggles somewhere. Right. And so, like Greg said, I will use the humor thing is amazing. I love that. I never said that. Greg said it. It's absolutely correct. Greg's $1 million word right there. So, but you also familiarize people with what you do, how you were. And what that does is it makes them realize, I'm looking at Greg. This guy teaches or coaches these high-level athletes. I see him on the internet. He's got thousands of likes. And then I go down there and I get instructed by him. And then I start to realize, oh, he's just human. And I watch how he interacts. That to me is a good coach, is not what you know. And there is value to what you know, but it's how you interact with the individual, because it can either speed up the process of learning or decrease the process of learning. And so when you increase the process of learning, you're building trust and the likability, and they want to come back, and then they're eager to learn more. And that's just any task that you're teaching, right? And so, but yeah, keep it simple, stupid. I love it.
It's awesome. Greg, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, and hopefully I can remember them because I want to address what both Steve and Sean said. So starting with Sean, we'll go chronologically here. The idea that, you know, this massive amount of curiosity and passion and, as Steve said, eagerness, I kind of look at that as that's like the fuel, right? And so if we got a 5-gallon bucket of gasoline, that can go a lot of different ways, right? That can turn into this massive uncontrolled explosion that we have when there's no guidance, there's no channeling of that appropriately, or we can put that into an engine that performs a very specific task. And so the goal as a coach or as a leader or as, you know, a mentor or whatever is to take that fuel and help that person channel it into an effective you know, series of tasks or protocol or whatever, so that they still have that fuel. We're not trying to like, no, calm down. You don't want to be this interested or this eager. You want to maintain that. And like Steve said, you want to feed into that, but you have to guide it appropriately so that it's actually going into a good use rather than just kind of being dissipated in chaos. And you know, to Steve's point too, that the coach athlete or instructor athlete, or, you know, however you want to couch this, that relationship is everything. You know, what's the classic coaching thing is, you know, athletes don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And as corny as that is, it's very true, right? You can be someone who understands every single detail and nuance of whatever you're teaching and be the worst teacher on earth, because A, you can't communicate it in a way that people understand, and B, your presentation of it comes across more as you just showing people how much you know, rather than you being invested in helping them get better at what they're trying to do. And those are two completely different goals and tasks, and the operation is completely different. So and going back again to what Sean said at the start, I wish you know, someone had sat me down and told me this when I was 18, 19, 20 years old. We all have a couple of those things. And I think this is one of them, is having some kind of mentor or model, especially early in life, but at any point it's important, who can show you how to channel these things that you have, you know, whatever it's interest, curiosity, passion, into productive, you know, processes and results, so that you can achieve what you're trying to, and not just kind of give up and get discouraged because you're expending all this energy into this thing, but it's just going everywhere rather than moving you along this particular path. So I definitely wandered off a bit far afield by the end of that one.
I
So
think you're right on line
again,
there.
Chance, save me.
I got you. No worries. And I hate to do this, but Steve's got a hard timing at one, so we have to let him go. And I wanted to give him an opportunity to give some final thoughts on anything we've talked about so far today. What do you got, Steve?
I think we really kind of covered it all. I mean, if you take a good coach, they know how to connect with an athlete or a student. That's really what it is. They know how to connect with them, and then they can relay whatever information to them. So you open up the conduit of communication. And so just like basic thing in what humans need in life is communication, because the more you know, the better you understand, the more you can apply. And so some of the times that I will talk to people and they'll get wrapped up in their head about not performing and stuff. And I will do a drill, and it can go two ways. It can be like, oh, okay, he has value, he can shoot the drill or whatever. Or, oh my God, he's way up here, I'm way down here. But I tell them, I am not here for me. I'm simply showcasing what I want you to do. I'm here for you. And so if I leave here today with you being a better shooter, goal achieved. Would you agree? And again, it's that mind thing, man. The mind is so powerful. If it shuts off or if it overcomplicates stuff, no matter how much you're communicating with somebody, you're just not going to break through. You're just not. because it's so the more you can release that from the mind, the better you can be. And so if I go and learn from Greg, I'm at some point he's going to showcase the drill to or a clean, right? The positions of a clean where he wants me to be, right? But with him inducing maybe humor. Now humor is injected at an appropriate time, right? And so, and I think everyone here on this panel here understands that. So I've seen this now from instructors. They joke all the way through the task, and then they start to. This is what I absolutely hate. They make fun of people while they're doing it. And I absolutely hate that. So what I would tell brand new guys off of selection on SWAT, and they come to my squad, and I would tell them, my goal here is to get you up to our level as fast as possible, because I get nothing by having you below me, because we're entrusting you to breach the door or do all these specific skills that I want you to do or expect you to do. But if I come to training every day and when we're making fun of you, what are you learning? Nothing. It just feeds my fat ego that I'm better than you. Well, that's a shitty ass team environment, right? So, yeah, how you relate to people, how you communicate to people is going to be everything. And I can almost guarantee you that you're going to be able to open them up because they trust you more and they're going to learn more.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And funny thing is,
hey, before Steve bounces, I just got to throw this at Steve so that he can chew on it for the rest of the day. Screw you, Steve. So this is what I think of as a pattern interrupt. Like when I'm considering any subject, I like to create a thought construct in my mind that is unusual, that makes me look at a subject in quite a radically different way, we'll call it. And so yesterday I was thinking, when I was putting that video together on the shooting range of my craptastic shooting, I kind of thought, how many rounds would it take me to get back to a level that I'd be reasonably comfortable with? And I figured it'd be about 10,000 rounds maybe. And so then I thought, okay, hang on a sec. I know I'm not going to shoot 10,000 rounds because I'm a cheap ass. I mean, when I was doing all the shooting, that was all free, baby. But when I was down in Southern California, I was buying that ammo and I didn't like paying for it. And so, like, if someone wants to give me free 10,000 rounds, let's go, baby. Building off of that thought, 10,000 rounds, I then thought, it ain't going to happen. So what do I have to my advantage right now as a 62-year-old versus, hang on a sec, Sean, half my age? That would have put me at 31, which means I was like almost at my peak in JTF2. And so, Steve, before you bounce, think about for the rest of today how you would fare against the Steve that's half your age. Like if you had to go head to head with that dude, let's put you out in the forest, let's put you in the city, let's put you wherever you want to go. It doesn't matter. Think about how you'd fare against that dude. I did this morning, I was thinking about how I would fare against me. And like at my age, I'd have to use the crafty McCrafty stuff because I wouldn't be able to do Speedy McSpeedy. So, you know, what it did for me was make me pattern interrupt who I am right now and think about my levels, as you mentioned. What level advantages do I have versus 31-year-old Sean? And I think it's a pretty good way to establish who you are right now, kind of what you've let slip and what you've kind of gained over the decades, like the secret sauce that the young buck didn't have. Anyway, something for you to chew on, buddy.
I like it. Hey guys, thank you very much. Greg, we follow you. My girls watch your content all the time. You're a great instructor. Awesome. Chance, thanks again, man. Sean, love you. I'm going to send you guys a couple of patches, so I'll text you here in a little bit, okay?
Sweet.
But
awesome.
Hey, see you guys. Thank you.
See you, buddy.
Good to see you, Steve. Take care.
All right.
Peace. This is it's a great little segue because I think there's so much that you touched on there that I cannot wait to touch on. But I want to get these comments out because they've been waiting for a little while. We got a couple of questions here too, which is I think we can touch on. Ethos Naros jumped in here. He said a little while ago, 3 Arrows Steve has a good idea. Bring people back to reality through simple questions to reset the brain. The dog name example. Dylan's in here. It feels good to be back. Good to see you, buddy. Dan C, this is the question I want to touch on. I want us to kind of talk about for a second. He says, are we mastering our lives as we mature? mastering our vision of the best life. As we grow, we shed weight from our lives that keep us reaching that vision. Maybe I'm just diving way too deep. I don't think so, but my thoughts so far, everything I've seen, we've talked about today, really brings to the mind a sculptor. Right? You take a massive clay, whatever that thing that you're doing now, and then you just start chipping away, you start shredding away all the pieces to get to the masterpiece. Now, like you said, Sean, you're not going to have the raw power, the raw size of the thing back 20 years ago, but you're going to be a much more refined version of that later on. You're going to have to use all those crafty McCrafty things. But let's answer this question. Are we mastering our lives as we mature? Greg, what do you think?
I mean, me personally, absolutely not. No, I'm kidding. But to the sculpting point, and I'm going to get the artist and the piece of art wrong probably, but I think it was maybe Michelangelo, and someone asked, how did you carve David? He said, I just took away all the pieces that weren't David. And so that is the perfect idea of eliminating all the inessential pieces and simplifying with regard to mastering your own life. And I think that has been, I'm 46 now. So for the past, 25, 30 years, that has been my overarching goal that I'm not always managing to follow well. But how do I keep my focus on the essential, the most important, and these things that are the most meaningful to me that then determine my course, right? And how do I stay on that course rather than being constantly diverted through distractions or obstacles and all these different things that we have, particularly in kind of modern life where we have to actually interact with people and go to work and do all these other things other than just simply master life. How do we stay on course, and what touchstones do we use in order to help us along the way? And I think again that goes back to, we need to look at all these really complex things and simplify them into a few, guiding principles. And so my just constant question to myself as I'm sitting in my office all day long is, what is the purpose of this? Like, I understand the purpose of making an Instagram video in the most direct sense. It's not that mysterious. But what is the purpose of me even bothering to create content on a social media platform at this point in my life? And being able to answer that question tells you everything. It tells you how to make that video. It tells you what to make that video about. It tells you how often you should be making videos like that. It tells you what you should think about the results of that videos and how you should feel about those things. And it completely changes the way you look at what you are doing day to day and gives you an opportunity to recognize when you are investing time and energy into things that are not moving you toward what you want to achieve. And helps you then start stripping those things away or finding ways to minimize your time investment in those while achieving the necessary results, so that you do have the time and the energy and the remaining passion and interest and curiosity, to use Sean's words, to pursue the things that actually matter to you.
I really like this. I use the term, what am I even doing here? But it's the
Right.
same question, right? Like, what am I even doing here? And there's been a couple of times where I've put some serious thought into it and had to go, I don't have a reason to beat this. This goes against everything that I think I'm supposed to be doing right now. I don't know what I'm doing here, right? And one of them was, this was, I think I was in my 30s, but I had gone out to a bar and I was just drinking, and I was like, what am I even doing here? Like, it becomes such a rote thing, and every day, and then eventually I realized that was not helping me in any way. Sean, you got any thoughts?
I do, and it's actually about thinking, and it's about introspection. And so, Chance, the reason that you were 30 years old in the bar, finally coming to the realization of, what am I doing here? That could have occurred way sooner if you had been, like, from a very early age, either raised in a way that makes you deeply introspective or deeply curious about how your mind works, or perhaps in the early phases of your military career, someone could have sat you all down and started talking about how the mind works and how curiosity can take you places. The most recent impressive dialogue that I've heard in regards to remaining focused in your life to achieve the things that you want to achieve comes from, I might botch her name, but I believe she's Eileen Gu. I think she's a freestyle skier at the
Oh,
Olympics.
yeah. I know who you're
She's
talking
about 22 years old. She's good on camera. She comes across as highly intelligent, but she was asked a question. I just saw this a few days ago by a reporter, and the reporter kind of the preamble was, sorry if this question comes across as insulting, or I hope this doesn't offend you, I believe was the preamble. The reporter wasn't trying to be offensive. She then launched into her question, which was, how do you think the way you think? Where did you learn to think the way you think? Where did you learn to work your brain the way your brain works? I'm curious, and I think some other people here are curious. Can you tell us about your brain? And so Eileen Gu, kind of on the receiving end, kind of chuckled and smiled, and I thought her answer was excellent. She stated that from a young age, she's been doing her sport leading up to the Olympics, and all along the way, as a young lady, she said, as a young lady, I really like thinking about how my brain works. I really like learning about me. I'm curious about how I perform and how I can perform better. So she said, I'm pensive. I spend a lot of time in my mind thinking about how my mind works and focusing on making it better. And the results speak for themselves. She kind of had an opportunity to laugh at some other reporters who were challenging her on why she only won a silver medal or whatever. And, she went on to state that she's won a redonkulous amount of medals and should have beat that guy upside the head with her medals, the dude who asked the dumbass question. So, at a young age, a young 22-year-old skier is, in my opinion, best in class at thinking right now amongst all of her peers, because she has actively focused on the idea that thought is important. It doesn't just happen. She is manifesting it in a directed way in the real time because she knows what she wants. And so she's made her life reasonably simple in the sense that she's given herself a commander's intent called, I want to be the best version of myself, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And I have goals and I'm going to head towards them. And that's enough. But you can't just set goals and allow the goals to make it all happen. You've got to support the goals with the scaffolding that creates those goals. And one of the biggest scaffolds you've got is your freaking mind. And Greg has raised the idea of mindset already. But I mean, we could end the show saying that life is all about mindset. If you're not thinking well, then it shows up on the daily. Anyway, a little off topic there with Eileen Gu, but I think it's relevant.
I like it. I think it's great. The Dan C jumped in here. He said it was an amazing response. And then Salty was in here a second ago. Said, came in late, but I love this episode. Understanding mastery is simply the basics done to a high standard is perfect. To your point, though, what's if we're going to break everything down to its simplest function, it all starts with the mind anyway, right? Because your body's not going to do what your mind it tells it not to, unless you have some sort of condition that is outside of your control. But even then, how you respond to that and how you manage it and how you do these things. There was a movie that just came out about Tourette syndrome, just won the BAFTA award. I can't remember the name of it, but I mean, something like that, being able to have involuntary convulsions of all kinds of things, but then to manage it and work through it and process it and then teach other people how to manage it and work through it and process it is to bring it back to its simplest level, which is up here. I think this is a fantastic point to go to. Greg, you got any other thoughts on any of this?
Yeah, to kind of add on to what Sean said, this idea that introspection, reflection, this very intentional examination of our own lives is such a missing component in so many of our lives. It's actually breathtaking to the extent that it is absent for a lot of people. And I look at that in a couple different ways. And the first one is what Sean said. Was somebody raised in a way, whether it be parents, teachers, coaches, some other type of mentor or leader who kind of guided them into this regular process of self-examination, right? Did that exist early on? Because that's when you build that as a habit, as a routine. It becomes a natural part of how you go through your days, right? It's a literally a daily thing, if not a continuous thing that is just inconveniently interrupted by things like your job and whatever. And then the second part of it, though, is I think that for those of us who were fortunate enough to have experiences as young people and get that kind of guidance, so that we recognize the importance of this kind of approach to examining ourselves and our lives and our purpose and all these things. But we have found ourselves in a position where life is so busy, so chaotic. We are so constantly underwater with obligations and stressors and all these other things that we end up not doing it to the extent that we know we need to. And I think that's where you start getting into the whole midlife crisis and this full-blown existential crisis of identity, is people get halfway down the road of their lives and recognize, why am I doing this? This does not make me happy. I have not been happy. I have not been enjoying this for the past 30 years. And yet this thing is what I've invested all of my life into. And you get into this position of regret, like, well, hey, had I been asking myself these most basic questions and trying to simplify what was going on in enough of a way that I could recognize when I was going astray from what was meaningful to me, I could have avoided this situation. And so I think that's why it's so critical to constantly be returning. Again, now I feel like I'm just overusing the word simplify and simple, but it is the theme you gave me. But recognizing, hey, we've got to rein this stuff in, lay the cards out on the table, kind of get things organized and recognize what we can get rid of. What can I eliminate here that is preventing me from doing and thinking and being who I want and need to be. And I think we end up just collecting like junk. It's like we're kind of these like psychic hoarders where we just collect stuff that just weighs down on us and prevents us from getting to where we want to go, without recognizing I could clean all this stuff up if I just set aside some time to do it. And it's going to be messy. It's going to be a hassle, but I can get rid of this stuff and kind of break through and get to the point where I want to be, at least be on that track. And I feel like within that 5 minutes, I mixed about 18 metaphors in really awkward, clumsy ways. But
I'm digging it.
You guys knew what I was getting at.
I do. And to this point, to your point about, around 40, around people have this midlife crisis. It's, it's a kind of a trope now. Everyone's with it used to be, at least in the 80s, it was the red sports car, right? The guy would be 40 and he got to get the sports car, or he'd have to get a bike, or he'd have to there were some pretty solid cliches around it. But what I think it stems from is mortality. I think, to Sean's post he put out about the heart issue there, a lot of people don't have those brushes with mortality until all of a sudden they're 40, right? They don't think about their lives in terms of their whole life and then everything ends. They think about, this will just be the way it is forever. And so we see the same thing with transition into different jobs or different careers or lifestyle changes, or I had my massage therapist was talking to me about this, and they're doing renovations on the clinic that she's in, But it wasn't her choice. She just happens to rent a space in that clinic, and now there's renovations, and now she's got to shift things, and she's worried about her clients, and like all these things start to come in, all the different complexities, and you've got to stop and break down like, okay, it's ending. How do we make the best of this? Where's the next choice? What's the next step? How do I still get what I want, which is, I either want to continue being a massage therapist, or I want to continue doing jujitsu, or I want to be a shooter, or I want to keep lifting, or whatever. I'm sure there was a point, Greg, where with some of the injuries you had, you were like, okay, I want to keep lifting, but I don't need to do the massive, huge lifts anymore. I just want to keep lifting because I like doing it. And Sean, I'm sure like when you hit the range, I bet there was a moment where you're like, oh yeah, I remember this. This is fun. I just started like enjoying it again, rather than having the pressure of all the things. Like I got to be able to do that. So I think this concept of understanding, at least at the very beginning, all things come to an end. So enjoy it while you're here. It changes the way we look at what we're carrying along the way. Because my backpack, if my ruck is full of rocks, and I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. Why am I still carrying rocks? But I like hiking, or I like rucking. Well, I can take some of those rocks out and still carry on with the thing I'm doing. It just doesn't need to be the intensity of whatever the goal was back in the day. Sean, you got any thoughts?
Yeah. Psychic junk collector.
Yep.
Yes.
Hoarder, even.
Hoarder. Collector and hoarder. It could be a show. I like that kind of idea because I think that we all do it. And it's probably all the more reason to identify who you're collecting from. If you're wandering through the world randomly collecting ideas on how to lift at an Olympic level by skipping through the interwebs randomly, then you are definitely collecting junk. But, if you want to get in the game, then you're going to follow a person like Greg. And so the distinction there is that you intentionally are seeking excellence in order to collect your junk, as it were. And I don't think too many people do that. I don't think they identify excellence within their particular trajectory or velocity or vector that they've chosen. It's just simply a collection process rather than a thoughtfully designed collection system. And so, that's maybe for another podcast. I'll say this, something that you'd mentioned earlier, Chance, and that was about tempering or tempered. One of the interesting things about the tempering process, as you stated correctly, is it's a removal of impurities. But if you make it too pure, then it becomes brittle. This sword behind me, if it was tempered too much, it would become a fragile weapon. And so I do feel, and I'm just interested in what you guys think, I do feel that as humans, we need a certain amount of unsolved impurity within us, for lack of a better term, in order to be robust enough or be able to be in doubt enough or be able to be, I still haven't finished this thing enough to keep us going or to keep us resilient in a process. The purest weapon, I don't feel, wants to swing itself one more time to test it because it knows it doesn't need to swing anymore. There's a freaking analogy for you.
This it brings to mind the yin yang symbol, in the fact that in the white you have black, in the black you have white. So you have to have some of the other to make it a whole concept rather than just one or just the other. And now I'm going to throw it to Greg, because what do you got, buddy?
Yeah, I mean, I did not see metallurgy coming into play here, but yeah, it's a great analogy, because there you look at pure metals, there are certain purposes for them, but generally we rely on alloys, right? We rely on mixtures that have been specifically created to have certain properties to achieve what we want to achieve. So I think about purity as a person as like the the monk, praying or meditating, 24 hours a day. Like that's the whole life, is that you are so singularly focused and present in this one thing that nothing else can exist. So that would be kind of like the pure thing. The opposite would be the psychic hoarder we talked about earlier, where there are so many impurities that this thing doesn't have any valuable properties at all. It's not, it's too rigid for one thing, it's too soft for another thing. It's, whatever the case is, you can't create anything or achieve anything with it. And so it is, like you both said, is finding that balance of the primary material, right? This kind of most important centering quality or purpose or whatever you want to call it, that is then kind of strengthened with all these other little pieces that provide opportunities and places for your curiosity to take you, these learning opportunities, and you have the opportunity to restructure all these ingredients, right, and to create this stronger, better matrix. um Now it's materials engineering. I don't know what we're doing here, guys, but so you're able to use all these different pieces that might, upon initial consideration, not fit in with this perfect pure material, but then you recognize, as Sean was saying, that they all play a role, and as this whole system, they actually create a much better product. And it's up to you to determine what exactly that product is, and therefore that's going to determine uh, what exactly you are mixing into this primary material, how you are arranging these things, how you are treating it, that sort of thing. I mean, I feel like at this point I'm reading horoscopes, because you could
Oh
just
man,
interpret that
dude,
however you want.
I got this, the best part is I have something right on the tip of my tongue for this one, and it has to do with the fact of weapons development over time, and it made me think of like the Bronze Age, right? Bronze is copper and tin, right? It's not pure copper, because otherwise it'd be too malleable. You can't actually use it um, for tools and stuff like that. You need a little bit of tin in there to strengthen it, to harden it. But so you're adding an impurity to to make it a better thing. And then you have, the Iron Age. Well, iron's great up until a point. Then you start to need steel. And so it almost simplicity almost breeds complexity. But through the long-term cycle of things, you have simplicity, which breeds complexity, and then that complexity gets honed down into a simple product again, and that breeds more complexity, because you get to use that thing in different aspects once you figure out how to simplify the complex, and it just becomes a bit of a cycle, which is super neat. Sean, I'm going to come back to you. What do you got?
Yeah, I'm down with that. It's a good example, actually, the Bronze Age, etc. But the only reason that those ages existed and shifted in the future is because of forward momentum of progression, the progress of mankind. And so mankind as a whole wanted to keep doing things bigger, better, faster, stronger. And so without that compelling or that compulsion or that without that focus of wanting to be a better version of yourself, there'll never be an Iron Age beyond the Bronze Age. If you're the bronze, you'll never see iron unless there's a reason for you to get to that age. And that's just the way of things. As a society, we'd still be in the Bronze Age if there weren't people in the population to want more. And why would they want more? Well, if someone's idle and just sitting in a corner, twiddling their thumbs and they're a thinker, well, maybe they'll want more, but often that isn't enough. They just wanting something different. It's usually an outside force that forces more, and that would be like war, or it would be revolutions, or it would be competing agencies that obligate the forward progression of something. And so when you take that down to an individual basis, why will anyone personally, individually, move from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age? Well, they won't unless they've got a freaking compelling reason. And it doesn't have to be an outside war model. You could have a freaking war inside of yourself. You've got to recognize it and then want to move to that next level, that next stage, that next thing. You have to have forward momentum reasons.
We did a show a while back, and it was, I can't remember what the actual topic about it was on, but we were talking about how the the war inside, once you figure out how to manage that war inside, then you can work on the war outside, and then you can work on the next one, and then you can work on the next one. But it all starts from understanding, again, goes back to introspection, goes back to our ability to actually recognize what we want in that moment. Do we want to allow the conquering hordes to come in and take all our stuff, or do I want to say no, 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 that's not going to happen? Because that's going to breed that next level of what do I do next? And I think, to simplify it, it comes down to either I want this or I don't. And I mean, you see that in selections all the time. Do you really want to be here? Do you really want to be here? Are you going to do the thing that's required in this moment at the most simple of questions? Do you want to be here? And I love it. Greg, you got any thoughts?
Well, I mean, I guess what I could add to that is where to even start. I'll keep it simple. You, as Sean said, you have to have a compelling reason to change, to progress, right? What that reason is different for each of us, but you also have to have the ability and the willingness to recognize that, right? And I think, again, that goes back to what I said earlier about people being so consumed with the chaos of life that they don't ever even find themselves in a position to have a chance to do that, right? And I've talked with a lot of other people about, spending time in the wilderness by yourself, ideally, and how it is this, you are putting yourself in a position where you have no choice but to finally confront these things that you've kind of safely tucked away in the back of your mind, while occupying yourself with other very important things, like which shirt to wear with which pants, and what Instagram video to make next, or whatever. And it can be a truly terrifying, unpleasant experience, and that is a reason why very few people are willing to do it, because they, maybe intentionally, but more often accidentally, had it happen to them once, and they did not like it, and they do not want to do it again. It's the same reason a lot of people avoid stuff like therapy of any kind. Even the simplest type is like, I don't know if I really want to go and investigate that stuff. I'll just go ahead and pretend everything's cool. And so you have to have that compelling reason. There has to be a level of discontent that is great enough that you are unwilling to tolerate it anymore. And you have to have the willingness and the ability to recognize that you have the agency to do something about it. And so that component, I think, is also missing in a lot of people, where they've gotten to a point, for various reasons, that they kind of feel helpless. Like, well, this is just how life is. It's just, a constant downpour, and every once in a while the sun comes out, and, it's cool for a minute. And then I go back to work and I shuffle along until I go pick out my grave plot and whatever. That's the deal. And so finding ways to break out of that. I mean, it really only takes one opportunity to take a step back and kind of dig into that stuff and recognize, hey, I need to come back to this. Like, I can't keep avoiding this, because I don't want to be discontent, unfulfilled, unhappy, forever. And this sounds very depressing now at this point, but it's all in the name of progress and personal development.
All in the name of progress. I love it. Sean, you got any points?
Well, I know it, but it is true. It is true. What you said is true, and the tension, of course, is the uncomfortableness of progress and how willing a person is to engage in that. I'll say this, that anyone can engage in the process, and the process will pull you through the process if you choose the right process. So if you don't have the conviction, or you don't have the parts, or you don't have the abilities or the knowledge or the background to kind of do these things by yourself, get pulled forward in life, then you've got to choose something that pulls you even if you don't like it. And so something that I like, first of all, you can be forced to progress in life. The army does that really well. I mean, you just don't have any choice, or you get to go to jail and eat bread and water. So there's the other choice. So, certain constructs will like pull you down the path all by itself. Greg has been in that arena. To lift at that level, the process will pull you down the process. Maybe you need to get your own sort of off the start line energy, but once you get into something like that, the process will pull you down it. Because of all the people around you, because of your coaches, because of the drama, because of the intensity, because of all of the things that was wrapped around Greg when he first started, all of those elements kind of pulled him down his path. And I'm not saying it was easy. I'm not saying that like he kind of shut down his brain grid and somehow appeared a decade later, the man, or whatever the case is. I know I won't even touch on that, but by him choosing a certain thing, the process kind of pulled him down the thing. But if you really want to face your own internal introspective demons, as it were, choose something that you don't have a whole lot of support around you. And I chose 24-hour solo racing because you don't have like all the energy of the crowds. You don't have the beep of the bar. You don't have a lot of things that like will keep you freaking in the game. The process is lonely and silent and discouraging. And as it pulls you down the path, the path is like almost a monk retreat, because there's just no one talking to you, man, except to yourself in your own little head when you're out in the middle of nowhere in the pitch black. So whatever you're going to choose in life, you can choose paths that will pull you down the path easily, and there will be paths that you choose where you're hardly being pulled down it at all. And it's those paths where it's kind of a silent path that is the most difficult, in my opinion, because you're struggling in the noise of your own life internally and having to force yourself to kind of keep going solo. So team, individual, just a thought.
I wanted to touch on something that we've been kind of hitting on, but not really saying out loud. We're talking about simplicity, but that does not mean any of this is easy. Like, sometimes the most simple things can be some of the hardest decisions, some of the hardest actions, but even though they are simple. And so I do want to just throw that out there, that everything we're talking about so far, yes, we may be talking about, strip it all down and make it simple, but that is by no means easy. If I wanted to go out and clean out my garage right now, yeah, it'd be great to be able to clean out my garage, but that would not be an easy task. I got a lot of stuff in there. I'm hoarding things in my garage right now. I'm hoarding things in my psychic garage right now. And to get rid of those takes a lot of effort, a lot of work, a lot of development, a lot of training, a lot of understanding, a lot of introspection. A lot of the things that you have to do may seem complex, but that's just because they're hard, not because they're complex. Does that make sense? You guys tracking on that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
What do you got, Greg?
Oh, well, beyond agreeing with you. Yeah, it is a really important point, and it is something that it fits perfectly into coaching something like weightlifting or shooting. Shooting is very simple. You squeeze a trigger and you send a projectile down to the target. What's so hard about that? And it's or like throwing a baseball maybe is a more understandable concept to more people. When you have put in the work and learned how to do it and trained and practiced and developed these skills to such a point that they are second nature, it's pretty simple, right? You can draw your weapon, present it, pull the trigger, round goes where you want it, right? You can wind up, throw a ball, goes right over home plate exactly the way you want it. But along that process, you're having to think your way through those things. So you're it's I don't know, I guess it's kind of a bell curve, right? You start very simple. You start with the most fundamental stuff. You build that complexity until you kind of reach its apex and you have mastered that. And then from there, it becomes more and more simple again because you have internalized it so well that you are no longer thinking your way through the process. It's not a complex process for you anymore, consciously at least, even though that process in its complexity hasn't actually changed, in isolation. So that may or may not have made any sense or
Yep. I'm
provided any
tracking. You're
value.
good. Don't worry. Sean, what you got?
Well, Greg stated it precisely as I see it. It's a bit of a bell curve. I mean, I'm not going to reiterate what he said because that's what I would say. But maybe just a little follow on is once you achieve that back end of the bell curve where you don't have to really think about the thing that you're doing, it just does itself. When you achieve that, we'll call it, for lack of a better term, maybe mastery. And I know that's kind of a strong word to use, but if you achieve mastery where the thing does itself all by itself without a whole lot of quote unquote effort from you, that's a great place to be. But that moment is often considered as the I've arrived. I'm now the ultimate version of myself in this particular thing because I've achieved mastery. I feel there's still a phase beyond that, and it is helping others understand the mastery that you've achieved or how you got there or how you do it, we'll call it. So I love a bit of mastery, but I love the phase beyond mastery, where I think it's been said, how do you explain quantum physics to a 6-year-old? Well, if you're a master, you'll frickin' figure it out. Because along the way, you had to figure it out yourself. So just that idea of mastery and the point beyond it is something that I feel a lot of people are unaware of, maybe as a goal.
Well, I mean, I think that's the pull of the coach, the pull of the instructor, the teacher, the somebody that wants to pass on the knowledge. And there are a rare few of people who see that beyond that curve because they get to the. I know a lot of people that get to the mastery that just like, yep, I'm good.
Oh, okay.
Happy.
Okay. Yeah. Like I agree. And I think that, you raise a good point about the coach and maybe, Greg is an example. Maybe he's a natural coach. And Sean, maybe he's a natural coach. And maybe one day when we were 3 years old, we were always meant to be coaches. But I don't see it that way, if I'm being honest. What I see it is, for myself, a natural result of my own life taking me in a direction that I've achieved some level of mastery light version, where once I got there, I wanted to see what was beyond it. And what I see beyond mastery is the mastery of teaching mastery. And something that I don't understand well enough right now, but it is my fascination, it is my curiosity, my passion to gain mastery at teaching mastery. And so it's not the coach in me that drives me towards that. It is something deeper inside of me at a genetic level or at a primal level. I have no idea. Maybe it's one of the reasons I'm on this planet. Who knows? But that is what drives me now, is the fascination with the mastery of teaching mastery. It's just, I don't think it's said often enough. I think that the black belt of life is to become a master in something and then like you've arrived. But I don't see it that way. So I'm curious as to what Greg has to say on that.
Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I've never thought of it that way, but I think it's a really interesting way to look at it. And it's almost, to me, I think the step after mastery, I wouldn't even say specifically it is to teach mastery. It's to finally figure out why you achieved mastery, right? So you have this process while you're in it, you have this goal. Well, my goal is to become the greatest at this thing. That's the why at that point for most of us. once you achieve it, then you have to stop and ask yourself, what is the point of this, right? What is the point of this now, at least in this stage of life? And how do I derive meaning and some sense of fulfillment from this process, which is now essentially over, and this thing that I've now accomplished. It's checked off the list, but it's not unless you choose to just leave it behind. And I think the natural progression for someone who wants to continue in some sort of process is to teach it, right? Is to say, wow, these are all these really difficult lessons I have learned. In my case, it's almost always the hard way because I refuse to just, make it easy on myself. But that's where you learn the best lessons and the ones that stick with you the longest, I think. But how can I then pass all this information I've learned to other people who are probably in my position and maybe help them not always take the hardest possible way every single time and kind of help accelerate their goal so that then when they get to my position, they're even better capable of helping the next generation, the next person, whatever it is. And so I think, at least in my experience, that has been one of the overarching processes in life, is recognizing the true purpose behind the things I've pursued. And they are not usually what they initially appear to be, or at least they change as I get older and as I go farther along those processes. And you recognize, like, hey, actually what I can do with this is so much more meaningful and so much more important than what I thought I was doing with it, or what the purpose I thought it served initially. And it becomes from a very kind of personal, self-centered purpose into a much more helpful purpose to those around you, and kind of wanting to contribute to the world collectively. You catch that one?
Very nice.
Rather than just enrich your own life for your own benefit.
So I have
Maybe
a
that's just
common-
the
No, I
the
got you.
hippie in me coming out.
This is the beauty. So I've been listening to this podcast, and it's talking about the rise and fall of an empire in Myanmar and Burma at the time, and it was a different name before that. But the funny thing that brought my mind to it is that they were practicing Buddhists, and they were talking about, the kings and queens would always be the enlightened version of the people in that time period. That's what they would see them as. And then I started thinking about the fact that, there's lots of people out there that have sought enlightenment. They've sought to be the best version of themselves, or the highest achievement that you can find. But the people that kind of reach enlightenment are the ones that just allow it to happen, rather than the ones that are constantly seeking it. And Sean, I think, to your point a little bit earlier, I don't think you were a coach at 3 years old, but I think you were an agent of change. Because from what you've told me, you like to stir the pot even from a young age. You just wanted to push the buttons to see what they did because I just want to see. And I think that develops into enlightenment, into the coach, into the next thing, because you want to see what happens. If I do this, what happens? I want to see it. Don't tell me about it. I want to see it. I want to physically be there. I think, Greg, you're probably the same, which is why you learn the hard way. The same reason I have to learn the hard way is that doesn't matter. Someone made the comment earlier, like or Sean, you were talking about it, if you could tell yourself at 20, or if somebody sat me down at 20 and said, hey man, like, this is what you need to do. This is where you need to go. This is how you need to think. I think a lot of us at 20 would have been like, go sit down, old man. Like, I'm not going to listen to you.
No, not at all. So, generally speaking, Chance, I'll agree with you, but I do have to add the nuance, which kind of flips the script on what you just said. At least it does for me. It's the right person saying the right thing at the right time. And generally speaking, when I was in my 20s, it required a certain man to look at me a certain way and deliver whatever had to be said in a certain fashion. And if that was done, I would do a 180 and head at maximum velocity in that direction.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right guy, right time, saying the right thing. And that is the problem. When I was a 20-year-old, not just anyone could have walked up and stepped up in my grill and said whatever, and then I'm going to execute against that. I was kind of particular about who I listened to, and I was particular about what I took on. And so whether it was a bit of luck that I had a certain way about things, the certain way about what I accepted and what I didn't, I didn't take it all in and accept it all in at face value. I was discriminating. And so critical thought, I suppose. So, that caused me a lot of friction, though, because I was not as easy as everyone around me to accept whatever the SOP was. I like to look at things from a different direction and kind of poke that model a little bit, create friction. As you said, Chance, I always feel like, not that I have to be an agent of change, I just feel like I am one. And it doesn't mean that that change is always positive. I mean, it's caused me a lot of trouble. I've peeled a lot of potatoes because of it. And so it is important, as you said, Chance, to know who you are. So if I am an agent of change, I guess I know that. But then it's also important to understand how you deploy what you are. You can't try to change the entire world in a moment, that's for sure.
100%. Greg, you got any thoughts?
I didn't think I did, but I did suddenly right towards the end of what Sean was saying. And this idea of having that correct balance of understanding your identity, knowing who you are, what matters to you, but not being intransigent, right? So like no, this is who I am. This is what I believe. This is how the world works. And this is how it's going to stay no matter what anyone shows me, says to me, whatever my experiences are, this is it. You need to have that to an extent. I know who I am. I know what's important to me. And you need to have the willingness to be open to influence, to new experiences, to advice from the proper people. And you can't go too far that way, right? You can't be this completely malleable, easily influenced person who is suddenly completely indoctrinated with whatever the next thing you hear is. Today the earth is flat, and tomorrow this is all a simulation, or whatever the case is. You have to be in that point in the middle where you have a mix of each of those things, where you have that your kind of guiding core principles based around your identity, what matters to you. You have that curiosity and that willingness to listen and to recognize who you should listen to, as Sean said. Like, it has to be the right person saying the right thing at the right time. And that's how you kind of gradually, progressively kind of change who you are into that sort of ultimate configuration where you are able to be who you want to be, achieve what you want to achieve, and kind of understand the world in a way that makes sense to you.
I really like that. I have an analogy that I want to touch on. It just popped into my head. I had a friend of mine who just got back from a trip to Pakistan, and he was telling me all about his experiences there, and he had a blast. And one of the things he stated was his travel companions were, telling him about certain areas and like, oh, we can't go there, we're really sorry, or oh, we can't do that, that's not good, or trying to give him the local rundown. And he was like, I'm a guest here. Like, I'm just here to check all this stuff out. My opinion is not really as valid at this moment. And what it made me think about while you were talking, Greg, was the fact that it's like going over to someone else's house, right? When you're taking advice from people or you're getting information from the rest of the world, is I have my own house and I've laid out the way I want. I got my bedroom where I want it. I got all my stuff where I want it. I got all my things laid out. So I know who I am. I know what my house looks like. But if I go to someone else's house, I can either be totally judgmental and look at their house from a realm of like, this isn't my house. How dare it not be my house? Or I can look at it being like, oh, I'm a guest in this person's house, but I really like the way they laid out those shelves. I think I might steal that idea. And then you can bring it home and you can put it up on your wall or not. And I really like the analogy in my own head. It's running around that when you see new information or you're getting advice from somebody or somebody's telling you something, you can look at it from a point of view of, I'm a guest here. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's cool. Oh, that's an interesting choice. I don't know if I would have gone with that one, but all right. Who paints a wall purple? Some people, sure. You know what I mean? So I think I just really love that analogy. Sean, looks like you got something. What do you got?
Well, I love the fact that you've created a house in your head, so that's interesting. We'll tear that apart in the green room. I'm going to move on to a different question, and I'm directing this at Greg initially, and then to you, Chance. So, but I'll give you enough time to kind of think about it because it's a challenging question, unless you have thought about this a lot in the past. Sticking to simplicity, my question is going to be predicated on a simple question. What was the simplest question that you were ever asked in your life, or the simplest statement that anyone ever said to you in your life that affected the most change? So again, I'll try to say it a little bit differently. Think back to your past, man, woman, or child, whatever was said, whether it was a question or a statement, I don't care. But what was it that caused the greatest effect in your life because of such a simple moment? Simple statement, simple question. And I'll throw that at Greg, and I'm kind of stretching the question out a little bit for his benefit because I know it's not an easy one to answer.
I like
So
it.
maybe I've given
Yeah.
enough time now.
I'm dying here, sorting through the file cabinet. I wish that something came to mind because that sounds like an amazing experience to have. And I genuinely don't recollect having a single point, like an inflection point like that. And I am willing to bet that I had several throughout my life. And you would think that if they were that important, I would remember, but there's been a lot going on, and head injuries included. But I would, so let me just say it this way. I believe something like that happened. And I believe that it would have been something along the line of, who are you? Right? So, something to do with understanding your identity in its most, well, in its simplest form, I guess, like in its most fundamental form, because that informs everything else you do. That informs how and why you make decisions about what you are doing, how you interact with people, how you receive information and give information. And so I think that has been, I'm kind of cheating on this question, I realize, but you gave me no time to prepare, so it's your own fault. Um, but recognizing that that is kind of the base from which everything else stems, right? That's the roots there that everything grows from. And so until you establish that well, you're not going to be able to achieve all these other things in a satisfactory way. Like it's never going to quite feel right. You're not going to feel like you were doing things as effectively as you could have. You're not going to find that sense of contentment with what you're doing, because there's dissonance involved. And so, yeah, I could have just lied and made up a story about, an old man I met in the forest and told me, like, you need to ask yourself, who are you? And oh my God, it was this revelation. I guess that would have been better, but
I think
too honest for
both
my
sides,
own good.
both sides would work, because the funny thing is I have a very distinct one, and the moment you said it, Sean, it clicked into my head. It was when my brother asked me this question: "Why haven't you done it yet?" And he was talking about me joining the army. We had this whole conversation. I've talked about the story on the show before, but he was in South Korea. He was teaching English and doing Taekwondo. And I had just lost another really crappy job, and I was sitting on top of a hill having a phone conversation with him. And he asked me that question: was, why haven't you done it yet? And I had no answer. And the next day I went down to the recruiter's office and I signed up, and that was the beginning of everything to get to me to here. And otherwise I would have gotten another dumb job, and I would have continued working and continued hating my life and kept going down that road. So this is I had that one. There's been a couple other ones, but that was the first one. Sean, what do you think?
Well, I know it's a tough question, and I don't have a good answer myself. If I compare my answer to Greg's as an example, my answer might be even worse because I'm kind of like Greg to some degree. I feel deep inside of me that I've had a number of moments like it, but I can't point directly to the year, to the day, to the even to the individual in some cases. These are almost like commander intent feels throughout my life, where I was challenged in a way that it kind of made me take my life in a different direction, but sometimes not always so evident or clear to me that I knew exactly why I was doing it. It was just a dissonance in me, that cognitive dissonance. And so again, I feel like the statement, I've said it so many times on the podcast, the right guy saying the right thing at the right time. These are the moments, these are the people that sometimes are nameless and faceless in my, TBI brain, that they were pivotal to me, but I can't even say their name out loud because I don't remember who they were. It was just the right thing at the right time that I engaged in. And a lot of this honestly is feeling based. So it's not me sitting down and hearing the right thing at the right time from the right guy and then getting a piece of paper and a pen and scribbling down an algorithm and figuring out the percentages and the equation means that, yes, I'm going to move now. Like the sentence might not even be finished from a certain person, and I'm already halfway down the path with them before they even finish the sentence. And it's not because I like the color of their eyes. It's not because I like how tall they are or what t-shirt they're wearing. It's a feel. It's a vibe. A lot of my life is driven by vibe. Since I've been young till today, the decisions that I will make will be driven by vibe. And so perhaps, Greg, that's the reason that I can't specifically say, well, there was that one time, that one guy that changed my life. I've got quite a few of them. I just can't map them out because vibe, man.
So
Yeah.
speaking of t-shirts, first off, sorry, Greg, I just want to jump in here. Is Sean's t-shirt that you were talking about earlier, the Point Break one, that's from our buddy Jason at Blackbird Industries. So if anybody wants one of those, go over to his website and get one of those for sure. Just wanted to touch on that. It's a great shirt. But I wanted to add something here, Sean, because you've told me a story, and I think it's not just about people in those moments. Sometimes it's a poster, like you said, or an email like you got for when the creation of JTF2 got started, right? You got an email that said, hey, we can't tell you what's going to happen. We don't know how hard it's going to be, but it's going to be hard. Sign up now. And you were like, yep. And that would be one of those moments.
Because of a feel of the thing. Because when I saw that, and I didn't know what I was even really looking at, but I just knew that it was going to be bonkers. And it's exactly what I feel I am. I didn't care what the name of it was because it didn't have a name. I just cared that it felt right. It felt like in alignment with who I am right now and what I want to be tomorrow and what it's going to do for the people around me. So as long as I'm in alignment with the feel, the vibe of the moment, then the minutia, it doesn't matter to me. How hard it's going to be, it barely matters to me. As long as it is, if it feels like it's me, it's going to get done. And so that's why, again, perhaps to Greg's earlier struggle to answer the question, I would maybe even struggle even more to give an answer to my own question because vibe is not a precise time-space continuum location. It is a thing that is like nebulous to some degree. So anyway.
Yeah. Greg?
Well,
what were you going to say?
What I would add to what you're saying is not having these actual clear-cut experiences where someone said something to you and it's more of a vibe, a feeling. I think what I would add to that is I think probably for you and for me, certainly it was more experiences that we had. And it was experiences that left us feeling certain things, whether or not we understood what they were or could name them. It was, as you said, this dissonance, or you received that email, everything you knew about yourself and kind of the experiences you've had to that point, you recognize that fit in to what you were supposed to be. And so it was this natural, you didn't have to think about, well, I should take a, sleep on this and think about whether or not I want to volunteer for this. It was like, nope, this is who I am. This is what I do. And I think for me, it has been more like experiences like that. And I think for a lot of people, me included, they are negative experiences. It is situations where you have been afraid, where you have been humiliated, where you have had loss, things like this. That it's well, as you call it, a pattern interrupter, where suddenly something shakes you loose from whatever thing you're in the middle of and have been for however long, and you suddenly have to take a step back and recognize what's going on here and what do I do about it. And that's where I think you get those inflection points, whether it's decisions about your career, about your personal life, whatever the case is that it is these experiences that create often unpleasant experiences that then lead you to the better experiences and kind of keep you on that path.
I like that. It's it is true. A lot of negative experiences, they almost force you to seek the simplicity of the moment. Like, why am I here? What am I doing here? What am I even doing here? And it usually stems from a negative experience for sure. Now, we've been going for 2 hours, and I just want to say thanks, because this has been fantastic. Greg, thank you. Sean, thank you. And thanks to Steve, even though he's not here. Great chat. Any final thoughts? Anything at all? Anything still bubbling around in the back of your brain, Greg? Anything at all?
No, I know I say this every single time, but I come into these podcasts like I don't have anything to say. This is a weird topic. It's, we're going to talk for 12 minutes and then be looking at each other awkwardly for the next hour and a half. But I'm always pleasantly surprised, and it's given me a lot to continue thinking about. That's for sure. It's been a great experience for me to change my life.
Love it. I love it. And don't worry, we wouldn't look awkward looking at each other. We would stare longingly, deeply into each other's eyes. That's usually how it goes here. And just so you know.
Fair enough.
You got any
That
final
works for
thoughts?
me.
I don't know about that. I'll say that, I'll use myself as an example. If we're talking about podcasting, Greg was saying, coming on, not really sure how this was going to go. Well, that's how I feel every time, every podcast I step into. I rarely know which way it's going to go. But here's a pattern that I'll throw out as an overarching pattern. We're a few hundred podcasts into this thing now. When I first started out, man, I overcomplicated this thing so much. Like, I didn't know what we'd talk about, and I didn't know which direction things would go. But I also was overcomplicating things, and that just didn't make it quite as much fun. Nowadays, I step into this conversation. I don't know where we'll go or what we'll cover, but I don't actually concern myself with that, because I know we'll go in the right direction, whatever that means. And why I enjoy it so much more now is because I keep it super freaking simple. I just exist in the moment. When Greg's talking, I'm listening. I'm not thinking about what I'll do later today, and I'm not thinking about how I'm going to retort. I'm just simply absorbing his wisdom and taking it on and seeing what shows up if I get a chance to talk later in the podcast. So that's how I enjoy the simplicity of a complex problem right now. I just try to be in it in the real time and not sweat the details, not overly complicate the real time moment.
It's a great point. And I was doing the math while you were talking. This is episode 475 of The Collective. We have done 104 episodes of the Goldmine in the Workshop now. And so we're just about 600 podcasts for just this, and not including all the podcasts we've done for other podcasts and other shows and all that stuff. I mean, you're well over 1,000 at this point. It is it has been a remarkable journey, of which, what did we do? We had to chip away all the non-essentials. But in order to do that, we had to throw everything at the wall and then chip away at the non-essentials, because it has turned into quite the show, I got to say. So I'm going to toot my own horn here.
Good job, Chance.
Yeah. Of course, it was all me. Had nothing to do with anybody else. No, not at all. It is the collective that has kept us here. So I really appreciate all the people watching, all the people asking questions, and this is awesome. So other than that, as we all continue to learn, build, and grow, We'll see y'all next week. Chimo.
Chimo.
Thanks everybody for watching and being part of the collective. If this has sparked any thoughts or resonated with you, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us grow and keeps the conversation going. We'll see y'all next time.